Welcome back to the agenda. So Israel looks set to escalate the conflict by further shutting down the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres continues to call for a peaceful settlement and for international human aid to step in. Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post, Avi Mayer, joins us now for an update on teams. Good morning, Avi. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I think just to give us your own personal, position, not necessarily position, but what you've experienced over the past few days. What have the past few days been like for you, and how are people coping with the conflict where you are?
Look, I think it's important to note this is not a conflict. What Israel has encountered is a massacre of unprecedented scale. Over 900 Israelis are dead in a terrorist invasion undertaken by Hamas on Saturday morning by air, sea, and land. They slaughtered elderly men and women in the streets. They burned entire families in their homes. These are the people we're talking about. There are now an estimated 100 to 150 Israelis being held hostage in the Gaza Strip. These include elderly men and women, entire families, mothers and children. We don't know what their situation is. They haven't given us any indication whether they're still alive. This is a country in trauma and a country in mourning. That is the situation we're currently in as Israel prepares to respond militarily, do what it must to recover its lost people, and deal Hamas a deadly blow. I have to say Israelis are extremely concerned about the fate of those who are lost, and they're in mourning for those who have been murdered in this horrific attack.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about what you're hearing from leadership, though, in Israel, where you are at the moment, right? And just what the response is going to be to not just the attack by Hamas, but also to the ongoing conflict itself. I mean, what is the plan here? We're hearing that leadership in Israel is saying Hamas-controlled areas will be flattened to rubble. Those are the words that we're using. I mean, is that the language that you're continuing to hear inside Israel?
It's important to note Hamas has used the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip as a human shield for years now. They have embedded themselves in the civilian population. They've intentionally located their military facilities and command quarters in the center of residential areas. That is what Israel must now contend with. That, of course, cannot prevent Israel from doing what it must to protect its citizens. That is what Israel will be doing at this time. Its Prime Minister, Netanyahu, made that very clear. Of course, as in other rounds of fighting, Israel will do whatever it can to avoid adverse effects on the local civilian population. But at the same time, the fact that Hamas uses its own civilians, and now ours as well, as human shields, cannot prevent Israel from doing what it must to engage in legitimate self-defense.
What are efforts looking like to get to those that have been abducted?
Well, we don't know exactly. We do know that there has been a massive reserve call-up of over 300,000 Israeli soldiers. This, again, is totally unprecedented, which, of course, matches this unprecedented moment. There have been indications that Israel may undertake a ground operation in the Gaza Strip in order to locate its lost civilians, these men, women, and children who've been taken by Hamas, and try to take them out. We don't know exactly how it's going to happen. We imagine there will be a significant intelligence effort as well. But of course, alongside it will be a determined effort to deal Hamas a devastating, crushing blow in order to ensure that it never does anything like this ever again.
Avi, the United States of America says it will be sending military aircraft and ships close to Israel. I mean, let's talk about what the implications of this really are going to be in your view. Are we seeing a more capacitated Israel and then, of course, an escalation of the violence?
Well, the United States is Israel's staunchest and most important ally. This is an expression of solidarity and support. It's also an expression of deterrence. This is a warning to any players, particularly Iran and its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, not to get involved, not to try Israel, not to try Israel's allies, because it will be met with crushing force in return. That is the purpose of the United States' decision to send these forces to the Eastern Mediterranean. Also, of course, to ensure that Israel has the means that it needs to undertake this operation, recover its lost citizens, and deal Hamas this deathly blow.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said residents of Gaza must find alternative places to go. So to leave their homes to ensure their safety. But with Gaza being, of course, completely shut out, really, what alternatives, in your view, do they have?
Well, actually, what we've been seeing is that the United Nations and other agencies that have facilities in the Gaza Strip have been accepting residents of those areas that are being used by Hamas as armed bases. Again, it's important to note, Hamas has intentionally embedded itself in civilian areas, in residential areas, with the intention of using Palestinian civilians as human shields. Israel, of course, does not want to harm civilians, which is why it's telling them to get out of those areas, go to areas that are protected by the United Nations and other international aid agencies, ensure that they are safe there before Israel undertakes what it must to keep its own citizens safe.
Is the international community doing enough to send aid to the affected communities and even to resolve the conflict? I mean, it's one thing to say that there are efforts, of course, to get those that have been abducted back, or to deal with Hamas where you feel that they are embedded within the Gaza community. But is there enough that is being done to stop the conflict, in your view?
Listen, it's important for me to note, this is not what I feel, this is verifiable fact. The Hamas headquarters in the last round of fighting was located under Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the main hospital in Gaza, using a hospital as a human shield. It is absolutely abhorrent. These are the people we're dealing with. They murder and massacre Israeli civilians and then use Palestinian civilians as human shields. So whether the international community is doing enough, I think what the international community must do is show unreserved support and solidarity with the people of Israel at this time, support its efforts at self-defense, while of course hoping that at some point in the future we can reach some kind of resolution with a Palestinian leadership that is not committed to Israel's wanton destruction and the wanton murder of Jews.
Yeah, just before we wrap up, I'm hoping that you can paint a picture for me, if you will, Avi, before I let you go. Overnight, what are you hearing in the streets in Israel? I mean, are you hearing any shelling? Talk to me about the sights and sounds of what's happening inside Israel at the moment.
Well, I can tell you I'm in Jerusalem. It is unusual for Jerusalem to be targeted by rocket attacks, but that has happened at several points over the past few days, including just yesterday. My team and I had to go to our bomb shelter in the middle of our journalistic work because we came under rocket attack from Gaza. This has been true of many areas in Israel, including Tel Aviv, another large city in this country, and of course the southern part of this country, which has been under constant bombardment from Gaza over the past few days, as it has over the past few years. I can tell you, walking through the streets of Jerusalem last night, the city was a ghost town. People are not out and about. People are staying home, close to their bomb shelters. This is a country in a state of shock, in a state of mourning, doing whatever it can to stay sane as Israel does what it must to recover its lost citizens and bring them home.
All right. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post, speaking to us from Jerusalem, Avi Mayer, there on the Hamas-Israel conflict.